Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of 10 to Life with me, Annie Elise. So I've been doing something lately where I've been trying to kind of get back to, I don't know if the term is correct or this expression, grassroots. I don't know if that's right. I feel like that's what I want to say, but correct me if I'm wrong. But I feel like I've been wanting to get back to the grassroots of what this channel is. And if that isn't the term, I probably sound like a just complete moron at this point. But what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to get back to like how we used to run this channel. Still doing the deep dives, still doing all of that, but also giving you guys case updates as they're coming out and as new updates are emerging. Before, what I was doing is like, I used to do that all the time, but then if updates would happen and I was like, oh, well, it doesn't really feel like it's a big enough update to warrant a full video, I would just kind of sit back and be like, I'll wait until there's more information or something like that. And a lot of you guys lately have been saying how helpful it is when I just jump on here and give you the backstory of the case plus the updates. We did it with the Long Island serial killer. We did it with Madeline Soto. I think we've done it with Idaho now at this point, the Idaho 4 murders. So I wanted to do that again because, again, the feedback I'm receiving from you guys is that it is extremely helpful. So the case I want to talk with you guys about today is the case of the two Kansas moms who were murdered, where it ended up being this super complex like scheme with all different family members involved. At the surface, it looked crazy, but then when you really got into the nitty-gritty details of it, it was like really crazy. And now there's even more information coming out, new documents, new unsettling details. So I wanted to just jump on here, give you guys the full swing of it. I want you to know the full case because if you're brand new and you have no idea what I'm talking about, you're like, great, updates are helpful, Annie, but not really that helpful if I don't even know the context of the case you're talking about. So now we have a good comprehensive video of the full case, start to finish, all the new updates, everything along with it. So that was a long-winded intro. Sorry, let me take a breath. All right, let me just catch my breath and then we're gonna get right into it. It's the case of the two missing moms. So let me break this down for you. Back on March 30th, 2024, two women in rural Oklahoma, they were reported missing. Their names were Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly. Now, right away, their disappearance became a huge news story. I mean, people all over the country were following every single development in this case. Within just a few hours of them going missing, the car that they were in, a blue Kia SUV, was found abandoned right on the side of the road. So family members who found the car, they contacted the police right away. And when the investigators arrived on the scene, what they found was so concerning that they immediately contacted the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. Now, only a few details were released to the public at that time, but the investigators definitely thought that Jillian and Veronica were in danger. So weeks went by, and law enforcement barely shared any information at all. Now, naturally, this of course meant that people started speculating on their own, and the rumors, they began swirling mega overtime. But eventually, some answers came, and these answers were shocking to say the least. So on Saturday, March 30th, 2024, 27-year-old Veronica Butler and 39-year-old Jillian Kelly were driving from Hugoton, Kansas to go and pick up Veronica's kids. Now, at the time of Veronica's disappearance, she and her ex, Wrangler, had been separated for quite some time. They were never married, and at that point, both of them were in relationships with other people. Now, at the time, Wrangler had full custody of their two kids. Veronica was allowed one supervised visit per week. It was also always on Saturdays, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There were a few people who had all been approved by the court to be involved in these visitations who were allowed to accompany Veronica during these visits, and Jillian Kelly was one of those people. However, most of the time, the visits were supervised by a woman named Cheryl Brune. Now, the problem was that on March 30th, Cheryl wasn't available. So Jillian, who also happened to be a pastor's wife, who Veronica had met through the church, went with her to go pick up her children. Now, that day, Veronica wasn't meeting with her ex, Wrangler. Instead, she was supposed to see his mom and the kid's grandmother, Tiffany Adams. Now, Veronica had one particular place where she would always meet up with either Wrangler or Tiffany to, exchange the kids. And this meeting location was an abandoned Four Corners gas station in Eva, Oklahoma. And Eva is about a 45-minute drive from Hugoton and about a 25-minute drive from Keys. So Veronica and Jillian planned to head there, pick up the kids, and then take them to a family birthday party in Kansas, all before bringing them back to Oklahoma later that evening. So everybody was expecting Veronica and Jillian to show up to the party with the kids late in the morning on Saturday. But the thing was, they never showed up. Veronica's family tried contacting her, but they couldn't get a hold of her. So two of Veronica's relatives got in their car, and they went off searching for her. So eventually, as Veronica's relatives were driving around and looking for her, they found Jillian's blue Kia SUV. It was abandoned on a dirt road that was just off the road that they had been driving on. But Jillian and Veronica were nowhere in sight. There were also miles and miles of wide open space all around, but there was no trace of the women. So it was very, very concerning to say the least. So Veronica's relatives immediately called the police. Now, while all of this was going on, Jillian's husband and Veronica's fiance were also starting to get pretty nervous. Neither of them had heard from their partners, and they actually went out looking for them too. And they both ended up calling the police individually and reporting the women as missing. By the time that they found Jillian's car, it was already surrounded by detectives and different investigators who had already responded to that first call, though. So right away, the police put out an endangered missing advisory for the women. And around this same time, the police also called in the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, also known as the OSBI. They wanted them to help with finding these missing women. In fact, by April 3rd, the OSBI officially released a statement saying that they had found evidence around the vehicle that made them think foul play was involved. However, they were pretty vague, and they didn't have a ton of details to share with the public, even though they gave this announcement. After hearing this, people became extremely scared and worried. The police had basically just said that there was some kind of attacker or killer on the loose. Even though they said that the person didn't pose a threat to the community, it was very reasonable to be wondering who was going to be next. So I'm sure that you could see this coming, but people started developing their own theories about what had happened. And like I said, it was a very, very rural area with a very small town kind of feel. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody else's business. So basically, lots of people were talking, and lots of people were already well aware that Veronica and Wrangler had been going through a pretty nasty custody battle for several years. And a lot of them thought that that was probably part of the motive for whatever happened here. So let's talk about Veronica and Wrangler and about their relationship, where things went sour, and the custody dispute. So Veronica and Wrangler had first started dating sometime around 2015, the year that Veronica graduated high school. From the start, the relationship was very volatile. Wrangler had a substance abuse issue. I mean, he was a pretty nice guy when he was sober, but he could become extremely aggressive when he was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The relationship itself was on again and off again, but Veronica found out that she was pregnant during one of those on periods. So she gave birth to their first child, a son, in December of 2015. They continued to date after their son was born, and they really tried to make the relationship work. Then, in April of 2018, Veronica gave birth to their daughter. However, all through this whole time, their relationship was really bad and really toxic. Wrangler had anger issues, as I mentioned, and could get very aggressive. So finally, they broke up for good in December of 2018. A few months later, in February of 2019, Wrangler filed for joint custody between himself and Veronica. But at the time, he said that he wanted Veronica to be the primary caretaker, and he only wanted scheduled visitation for himself. And that May, the courts apparently decided that that sounded like a pretty good setup. So they gave Veronica custody, with Wrangler being able to see the kids during scheduled visits. However, by the summer of that year, they were now fully sharing custody of the kids. Wrangler would have them on one week, then Veronica would have them the next, and they would just go back and forth like that. It wasn't anything legally binding. They decided to do that on their own without the court's intervention. However, the 50-50 custody agreement was eventually made official later that same summer. So everything seemed fine. Everything seemed to be working. The problem was that over the next year, tensions got worse between Wrangler and Veronica. In June of 2020, Wrangler said that he now wanted full custody of the kids, and they once again had to go to court. At the hearing, Wrangler made a bunch of accusations about Veronica. Basically, he said that she was purposefully making it very difficult for him to see the children. She wasn't providing them with a stable environment, and he said that she was coaching the kids to hate Wrangler. He also said that Veronica had moved the kids multiple times within the past year, all without his permission or his knowledge. She had taken them from Kansas to Colorado, back to Kansas to Oklahoma, and then back to Kansas again. During those moves, the kids would sometimes go to stay with Veronica's friends and also her family, all without Wrangler knowing. So basically, he was supposed to have half of the custody rights, but he didn't even know where the kids were or how to get a hold of them when he needed to. Meanwhile, according to him, she was out partying. She was handing the kids off to various people, unable to get a steady job, and was even fired from multiple jobs from being unreliable. On top of that, Wrangler argued that Veronica was putting the children in very harmful situations. Apparently, the kids had suffered numerous injuries under her care, and Wrangler was never notified about what had happened until way after the fact. Wrangler and his mother, Tiffany, both testified that Veronica's brother had sexually harmed the children. And what's worse, there was even evidence to prove it. And Veronica had been previously told by the court that the kids could never, ever be around her brother. But Veronica didn't listen, and she kept bringing her kids around him. Now, all of that sounds really bad, I know. But Veronica was trying to defend herself by saying that Wrangler was the much worse parent in all of this. She had made 5 formal complaints to CPS about Wrangler, including an accusation that he was physically harming their son. But Wrangler turned around and said that all of those allegations were just false. Veronica was making them up, all to get back at him. Well, during the custody hearing, Veronica never even denied that she had made up those allegations. She pretty much admitted that she had lied about Wrangler and that she wasn't providing the kids with a safe and stable place to live. She also admitted that she was illegally receiving welfare assistance from the state of Kansas while she was living in Oklahoma. Additionally, she didn't have anybody who could provide any solid testimony on her behalf that she was a good parent. But Wrangler did. Multiple people came in and said that Wrangler was a great dad. He had gotten over his substance abuse issues and really had turned his life around. He was involved in the kids' lives, he bathed them daily, he fed them daily, he played with them, he knew their favorite foods, had a stable job, kept a clean home, and the kids were never harmed while they were under his care. So because of that, Wrangler was officially granted full custody of the kids, and then Veronica was limited to supervised visits once a week, every single Saturday, as I mentioned. In March of this year, Veronica had filed twice for extended visitation. A hearing about the extended visitation was scheduled for April, and it seemed very likely that Veronica would be granted unsupervised visitation with her kids. Especially because, like I mentioned before, Wrangler was now in rehab at the time because his life had also changed a lot throughout 2023 and 2024. It's almost as though they kept kind of flipping positions, right? Wrangler had married another woman in the summer of 2023. However, his substance abuse issue resurfaced, and his aggressive nature also started up again. At the beginning of this year, his wife ended up pressing charges against him, and he ended up being arrested for a domestic dispute against her. She dropped the charges in March, but left Wrangler anyway. She made public statements insinuating that she had to leave this relationship because she was scared of Wrangler. And Wrangler also had a prior felony conviction and was found to be in possession of a firearm, so he was still sent to jail even with those charges being dropped. But at the beginning of March, he ended up being released so that he could spend 6 months in mandatory rehab in Oklahoma City. Now that rehab stint started on March 22nd. Just a couple of days before Veronica and Jillian disappeared. So when Veronica and Jillian first disappeared, many people thought that Wrangler was involved because of all of the issues that they had had in the past, right? But that was physically impossible because Wrangler had a very strong alibi. He was in Oklahoma City, and he was nowhere near the area where Veronica went missing. It's not like he could have just checked out of rehab for the evening and then come back without anybody noticing. Did it mean he was involved in planning or plotting? Maybe, but definitely not in the physical act. It couldn't have happened. So people were digging up everything that they could find, and eventually they started taking a closer look at another possible suspect. Who had motive? Who had means? Who had opportunity? And this time, it was Wrangler's mother, Tiffany. Tiffany had been the children's primary caretaker for a while. The court never officially gave Tiffany custody of the children, but this is kind of just what had happened. When Wrangler went away, she took on the position of caretaker, and it was just something that made sense. Now, Tiffany and her longtime boyfriend, Tad Colum, were very well known in the area. Their families had lived there for a very long time and had built a name for themselves as farmers and ranchers. Being such a rural area, it was often said that their families could get away with almost anything because of this. The area is known to be pretty lawless, if that makes sense. I mean, rules don't necessarily apply to you if you're from the right family. And Tiffany was always very arrogant and very aggressive. She was kind of like her way or the highway type of person. That was her mentality. And Tiffany and Tad were also, to be honest, a little bit scary. I mean, there was kind of this aura of danger around them, and people said that they were just outright mean. They threatened anybody who ever got in their way about anything. But Tiffany was also very involved in the community. She was once on the board at the local hospital, she was a school board member, and she was also serving as the chair for the county's Republican Party. And when she was part of all of these groups, she made all the rules. She did not care what people thought, and she actually became verbally aggressive whenever people tried to go against whatever she was saying. She pretty much did whatever she wanted to do. Plus, many people who were close with Veronica knew that she was very scared of Tiffany. They never had a good relationship at all, and Tiffany did not like Veronica, not in the slightest. Every time they were going to make these exchanges with the children every Saturday, Tiffany always made it very difficult for Veronica, and she was always trying to come up with different reasons of why she could not bring the kids to her. Now, the gossip around town was that Tiffany didn't like Veronica in part because letting anybody else get involved with the children would mean that Tiffany would have less control over them. And I don't want to make it sound like she was just sort of annoyed at Veronica. According to Veronica's friends, she was scared that Tiffany may try to seriously hurt her one day, specifically to keep her from getting custody. On April 13th, law enforcement made a huge announcement. 4 people had been arrested in connection to the disappearance, including Tiffany, her boyfriend Tad, and their friends Cole and Cora Twombly. An affidavit was released that gave detailed information about the investigation leading up to those arrests. It said that when Jillian's blue Kia SUV was discovered, it was on the side of the road, which we know. But the driver's side car window was smashed. Blood was in the road, also in the car, and Veronica's broken glasses were in the road along with a bloody hammer. A pistol magazine was also found inside Jillian's purse, but no gun was found. So this was why they brought in the OSBI right away, and why the investigator said immediately pretty much that they thought foul play was involved. I mean, given how much blood they found, it was obvious that something very, very bad had happened here. Veronica and Jillian didn't peacefully just get up and walk away from their car. No. There was a hammer, there was blood, a missing gun. Now, since the investigators knew that the women were going to meet Tiffany, they questioned her almost immediately. She said that the kids had been staying with some of her friends, Barry and Lacey Cook, and that they had been staying with them the night of Friday, March 29th. Tiffany said that she was going to go pick up the kids from the Cook's house on the morning of Saturday, March 30th, then go to the exchange. But she said Veronica had called her and said that she needed to cancel that meeting. She needed to cancel the exchange. So Tiffany stayed home, and she was there until she went to go get the kids around noon. She said that she was also at home when they were discovered missing, which was around 10:30 a.m. However, as we know, digital and forensic evidence will always get you, especially anything with your cell phone. Because the police pulled up Veronica and Jillian's cell phone records, and those records told a completely different story. Now, Veronica did call Tiffany the morning of March 30th, but it was not to cancel the meeting. Because at the time of the call, her cell phone showed that she was in the area near Jillian's house. This was also around the time that Veronica and Jillian had originally planned to meet up and then head towards that Four Corners gas station. Both Veronica and Jillian's cell phones showed them traveling from Jillian's house toward that gas station as well, where they were supposed to meet Tiffany that morning. However, then their phones suddenly stopped pinging around 9:42 a.m. And coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, they stopped pinging in that same area where the car was found. So obviously, if Veronica really was going to cancel her visit with the kids, she wouldn't have done any of the things that her cell phone pings said that she did. I mean, why would she still meet with Jillian? Jillian and Veronica weren't super close friends or anything, so Veronica really had no other reason to be at Jillian's house. Why were they also still traveling to the Four Corners gas station to pick up the kids? Why didn't Veronica tell any of her family members at the birthday party that she wasn't going to be there? Why would she do any of this if she had told Tiffany that the meeting was canceled? It didn't make any sense, unless you assume that Tiffany was lying about that part of the story. Now, on top of all of that, the police interviewed the woman who usually supervised Veronica's visits, Cheryl. Cheryl said that she was planning on going with Veronica that day, But Tiffany randomly contacted her, and she told her to take the next few weekends off. Apparently, Tiffany told Cheryl that she was going to supervise the visits for herself. She said she wanted to see how Veronica acted with the kids and wanted to make sure that nothing strange was happening. And as unbelievable as it sounds, this was technically allowed. Tiffany was an approved supervisor. The courts said that it was okay for her to keep an eye on these visits, even though she obviously had a bias against Veronica and didn't want to see her get custody. So this story could have been true. Tiffany might have wanted to supervise everything herself. But again, if that were the case, I still don't see why Veronica would also bring Jillian with her to pick up the kids. She wouldn't have needed Jillian if Tiffany was doing the job of being supervisor that day. And on April 1st, they ended up obtaining a search warrant for Tiffany's phone. It showed that in the months leading up to Veronica and Jillian's disappearance, Tiffany had searched on Google for different things like taser-level pain, gun shops, prepaid cell phones, and how to get someone out of their house. In late March of 2024, Tiffany also bought 5 stun guns at a gun shop in Oklahoma, and she also bought 3 prepaid cell phones from a Walmart in the same town. All 3 of these phones were in the exact same location as Veronica and Jillian's abandoned car, and at the exact same time that Veronica and Jillian seemed to have just vanished and disappeared on March 30th. The phone's last known location was a farm about 8.5 miles away from the abandoned car, and it pinged one last time around 10:30 a.m. before then being turned off. And then the police found a real bombshell in all of this on April 3rd. And that was when they interviewed Cora and Cole's youngest daughter. See, she told the police that her parents had been friends with Tad and Tiffany for quite some time. In the past few years, they apparently had formed an anti-government religious group, which they called God's Misfits. The group was mainly composed of Tiffany, Tad, Cora and Cole, and Lacey and Barry, who, remember, were the ones watching the children at the time of the disappearance. And then there was one more man involved named Paul Grice. The Twombly's daughter said that she had overheard her parents talking with Tiffany about Veronica multiple times. They said that Veronica was a bad mother, that she hadn't done enough to protect her own kids from the abusive brother, all of those things. They also talked a lot about how Veronica needed to be gone, permanently. According to the daughter, the group made a couple of different attempts as well on Veronica's life before she actually went missing. Once was earlier in February of 2024. Apparently they planned to follow Veronica while she was driving and then throw an anvil in her windshield. But anyways, the group went to Veronica's home and they had this anvil ready and they were just kind of waiting for her to leave. But the problem was Veronica never left her house. And that explains why Tiffany Googled how to get someone to leave their house. And that Google search was exactly during this time. The daughter then said that on March 29th, her parents told her that they were going on a mission. They were going on a mission with Tad, Tiffany, and Paul. They said that by the time she woke up the next morning, they would be out of the house. And sure enough, the daughter woke up around 10 a.m. the next morning, and her parents weren't home, just like they had said. They got back at around noon in their blue and gray Chevy pickup truck, and they immediately told their daughter to clean the inside and the outside of this truck. When she asked her parents what had happened, they said, "Things didn't go as planned, but we won't have to worry about Veronica Butler ever again." They also said that Jillian had to die because, quote, she wasn't innocent either. She supported Veronica. The daughter then asked her parents if they had buried their bodies in a well, and they replied back, quote, something like that. So all of her information was, of course, a huge break in this case. However, the police didn't want to rely on this one witness. I mean, there was no reason for them to think that the daughter wasn't credible, but the truth is people can lie. People can misremember. You can't really go off of one person's accounts. People also can exaggerate. So the detectives needed something harder, something more concrete. And luckily for them, while Wrangler was in jail for those domestic charges, those domestic dispute charges way back before he went to rehab, he had made some phone calls that were recorded. In these calls, he confessed that he knew that his mother wanted to get rid of Veronica, and he also confessed that he knew that Veronica was scared of her. Then another witness came forward and said that they saw Jillian and Veronica's car on the side of the road on March 30th, well before law enforcement or anybody else had arrived. And they said that when they drove past the car, they thought that something had happened to the women and that they needed help. This witness was going to stop, but then they saw a white truck with a white trailer parked in the road near the car. So the witness figured that this person in the trailer was helping the women, so they just kept on driving. However, later on, when they saw that these women in that car had gone missing, they definitely realized that this incident had seemed a little bit off. And coincidentally, investigators discovered that Tiffany owned a white truck and a white horse trailer. So both ended up being seized the day that she was arrested. However, no further information about them has been released. So finally, the detectives interviewed the person who owned the land where those prepaid phones last pinged. They confirmed that this property owner was not linked to the disappearances, but he still had some very revealing information, because the man said that Tad rented the land for his cattle. And on Friday, March 29th, Tad had contacted this property owner and asked if he could do some work with a bulldozer on the land. Tad said that he wanted to cut down a tree, he wanted to bury a stump, and then he wanted to bury some concrete. The property owner said that that was fine, and Tad went to it. He apparently was working on the property near a dam and a pond, and everything that he was doing apparently kept him there pretty late into the night. The next day, on March 30th, the property owner noticed that Tad seemed to be all done with his work at about noon, because now the bulldozer wasn't there anymore. Now this was, of course, no surprise, the same day that Jillian and Veronica went missing. So of course it didn't take the police very long from there to finally swoop in and arrest the suspects, who now had just a ton of evidence heaped up against them. On April 14th, after all 4 people were arrested, the OSBI officially announced that both Veronica and Jillian's bodies had been found. They were 8.5 miles away from the abandoned car, in that same area where Tiffany's prepaid cell phones last pinged, and in that same area where Tad was digging a hole to bury concrete and a tree stump. And Tad did dig a hole, but it wasn't for the concrete or the stump. The bodies were found 10 feet underground, and they were covered with hay. And the burner phones were also buried nearby. A 5th person was arrested. Good old Paul. You may remember that I mentioned his name earlier. He was also a member of God's Misfits. And the Twombly's daughter had told the investigators that he was involved in this from the get-go. Now, as for why he didn't get arrested until after everyone else, it's not entirely clear. The police had questioned him a few days before he ended up being arrested, and it's a bit confusing, but some reports say that Paul confessed to everything. So supposedly, the police let him go and then turned around and arrested him a few days later. Other reports say that Paul was on the run and that it took the police those couple of days to catch him. I don't know what version is exactly the truth here and how everything played out, but we do know what we do know. Officials have confirmed that at some point Paul did tell them everything that had happened before, during, and after Veronica and Jillian's deaths. All 5 of them have now been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. On April 16th, Tiffany, Tad, Cora, and Cole all pleaded not guilty, and a judge denied them all bond. Then on May 1st, a few weeks later, Paul was also denied bond. They are all being held, all separately from one another, in the Texas County Jail. Now, for the most part, it seems like Tiffany's motive for the murders was clear. She was a person who wanted control, and she was used to getting what she wanted. She wanted full custody of the kids. She didn't like Veronica, and she would have done anything to get her out of the picture. So she bought prepaid cell phones, and she came up with this plan with her weird misfit group of friends. She told Cheryl not to come that day, not to supervise the visit, that she was going to instead, and this is most likely because she, of course, didn't want a third party involved in any of this. She didn't want any roadblocks. The group also knew the route that Veronica would drive. They ran her off the road, they trapped her, and then they attacked Veronica and Jillian in their car. And Jillian wasn't killed or taken because she did anything wrong. She just happened to be there at the time. And since she was, Tiffany assumed that Jillian was somehow taking Veronica's side in this custody dispute. Veronica is the one who was driving, and it's been said that Tad was the one who attacked her. Now, she must have put up a very big fight because Tad had crescent-shaped scratches resembling fingernails, like the edge of a fingernail, all along his face. After they blitz attacked these women, they took the women to the property that was 8.5 miles away. They killed them, and then they buried their bodies in the grave that Tad had dug the previous day. It's unknown how the women died exactly, though. Some sources say they were shot, but some say that they weren't. Now, all of this happened within 30 to 45 minutes. and their home was about a 20 to 30 minute drive from where they had attacked Veronica and Jillian. But it wouldn't have necessarily taken this particular group very much time to commit this murder because, they had a plan, and everything was already pre-planned and put in place before it happened. However, there is still a lot of speculation that the larger group of God's Misfits had a much bigger role in this crime. I'm also going to pause here to say that some reports do say that the group only referred to themselves as the Misfits and not God's Misfits, but the official affidavit says God's Misfits. So that's why I'm using that term and why I'm saying that. But basically, all the core members of this group, namely Tiffany, Tad, Cora, Cole, Paul, and the Cook family, believe that they are American state nationals. Some reports said that they considered themselves to be sovereign citizens, but the members have explicitly denied this in the past, saying that they were not sovereign citizens. And while the two are similar, there are some major differences between American state nationals and sovereign citizens. Sovereign citizens believe in the Constitution, and they use it to justify their belief system. But American state nationals do not believe in the Constitution, not at all. They are very, very religious and believe that the country is the property of God, and that they live, quote, under God's law and His grace alone. Therefore, the Constitution doesn't apply, because it wasn't created by God. They also believe that the United States government is just a tool that can be used to control people. They refer to the U.S. government as the corporation. However, like sovereign citizens, they do not believe that the laws of the U.S. government apply to them because they don't consider themselves to be American citizens. I know, it's kind of a lot, guys. But this movement has a really large following across the United States and even Canada, with lots of groups organizing classes and other events. Now, we know that Cole and Cora attended seminars about those beliefs. The seminars mostly focused on teaching people how to be an American state national, how to argue with law enforcement, and more importantly, how to renounce their own citizenship. They believed that if they took the very last step, namely renouncing their citizenship, then U.S. laws didn't apply to them, which is not how any of this works, but it does sound like at least some of the God's Misfits may have really actually believed this. The Cook family and Paul Grice have officially filed for their citizenships to be revoked. Many people think that this group's beliefs had a very big influence on their decision to kill Veronica and Jillian. Some have said that God's Misfits as a group are an extreme cult, and that they were actively trying to take over their community before the murders. I've also heard that they were always trying to get people to join their group and would use scare tactics to intimidate them. People said that they were obsessed with children in a way that was creepy and that they wanted total control of them. However, as of right now, this seems to just be a lot of rumors, and I haven't seen much hard evidence to prove what parts are real and what parts aren't. It seems like this group did meet weekly, but the meetings were very casual, as I mentioned previously. They just kind of ate dinner, they talked, they played games, maybe they would talk about the Bible. Sometimes other people did attend, but they weren't consistent members like the other couples who always were a core group and always held these meetings. Now, while these beliefs are definitely bizarre and revealed a lot about how those 5 alleged murderers thought and saw the world, it seems unlikely that this group was some huge, well-known, influential cult who was just trying to take over anything beyond their immediate families. So like I said, within the past month, many updates have now come out about this case, and the OSBI released a document regarding the arrest and also the search warrants that had been issued for Tiffany, Tad, Cora, Cole, and Paul. Say that 5 times fast. Now, these documents state that on Sunday, March 21st, Tad went to James Beasley's house, which was the man that he rented the land from. This is the land that Tad was doing, quote, work on, where Jillian and Veronica's bodies were eventually found. Apparently, Tad told James that he was worried because people were suspicious of him being involved in Veronica and Jillian's disappearances, and he didn't want anyone to start bothering James because he was somewhat connected to Tad. 2 days prior, Tad had used a skid steer, which is almost like a mini bulldozer, and he used this to dig a hole where Jillian and Veronica were eventually found. And he was worried because this skid steer had left tracks on the land. Tad told James that he thought that these tracks would look suspicious to the police, especially because the skid steer was no longer on James' property since he had taken the skid steer home. Say skid steer 5 times fast, guys. It's a tongue twister. But anyway, James had assured Tad that if the police came to his property or if anybody else asked him any questions, he would tell them that Tad had done some tree and dirt work for him. Now, while we have limited information about this interaction, it seems like James was ready to cover for Tad, which I don't know about you, but to me it is a little bit strange that this guy was willing to cover for Tad right away. But we also have heard that Tad and Tiffany had this reputation in the community, this reputation for being aggressive and controlling of other people. And maybe that's exactly what they did to James. But in any event, that's just a thought and nobody really knows anything for sure. We also still don't know exactly how Jillian and Veronica were killed. It was previously reported that they were shot, but a medical examiner had confirmed to News Nation that the women were not shot. However, no further information about their deaths was given, so we still are unsure. However, we have learned that Jillian and Veronica weren't just buried in a hole. Their bodies were actually stuffed in a chest freezer, and that chest freezer was then buried 10 feet underground on James's property. While the police were searching for their bodies at that property, they also had a list of other things that they were looking for. That list included Veronica's clothing, which was a dark gray t-shirt, denim shorts, dark colored socks, and gray Hey Dude shoes. Jillian's clothing, which was a long sleeve blue plaid shirt, a ring, a pink v-neck, and blue capri pants with white low-top shoes. They were looking for both of their phones, Jillian's Taurus handgun, which was supposed to have a live round in the chamber, and then also a cloth holster. If you remember, a pistol magazine was initially found in Jillian's purse when they found the abandoned car, but no gun was ever found. So police have obviously been trying to find that gun. Now, I don't know if this means that Jillian and Veronica were found naked or what, but it seems like none of these items were found on James's property. However, they did find a bunch of random items inside that hole, and these were items that didn't belong to Veronica or Jillian. Nevertheless, it is interesting because the items found were a pair of Wrangler jeans with bloodstains, a brown sweatshirt with bloodstains, a black sweatshirt with bloodstains, another pair of Wrangler jeans with, you guessed it, bloodstains, a red sweatshirt with, say it with me, bloodstains, light-colored socks, a roll of duct tape, a gray shirt with bloodstains, a saw handle, a ratchet strap, a black Carhartt jacket with bloodstains, a cloth glove, a sheathed black K-bar knife with bloodstains, a gray ball cap with bloodstains, bluish gray Skechers shoes with bloodstains. God, I need like a dinger, right? Bloodstain, 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 bloodstain. Also boots with bloodstains, a black taser, a flashlight, a gray Dickies shirt with bloodstains, an electrical cord, and black tape. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, your mind is probably like, okay, Annie, first of all, that was a laundry list, no pun intended, because it was a lot of clothing, but all of that clothing was probably belonging to the killers, right? They were like shedding their clothing, disposing of it in this hole. Now, there hasn't been any information released, though, on who owned these items or if they were tested for DNA. However, considering the fact that most of these items were covered in blood, I do think it's safe to assume that these items belonged to Tiffany, Tad, Cora, Cole, and Paul, because clearly, I think, in my opinion, again, I'm no expert, but I think they were trying to hide evidence. Now, in Tiffany Adams' arrest warrant, it indicated that on April 1st, she went to a cell phone repair store to get her silver iPhone repaired. The phone screen had cracked and the back glass was severely damaged, and Tiffany told the store attendants that the phone was run over by a car on a gravel road. The store took the phone in, but then as soon as Tiffany left, they called the OSBI. We don't know exactly why they called the OSBI, though, right away, because it was only a couple of days after Jillian and Veronica were reported as missing. But remember, this also was a very small town, and rumors had already started swirling by this point that Tiffany was involved in their disappearance. So the store repaired the phone, and then they gave it to the OSBI, who ended up extracting a lot of data. 177 gigabytes of data, to be exact. After extracting the data, they gave the phone back to the store, who then returned it to Tiffany, who was, just completely unaware that her phone had been searched. However, for unknown reasons, Tiffany brought the phone back to the store for repairs again on April 9th. Again, the store notified the OSBI, who extracted even more data, and then the phone was eventually returned back to Tiffany. Now, videos of Tiffany just days after Jillian and Veronica went missing were released, which show Tiffany using a self-checkout at a store wearing a shirt that says, "Jesus is my savior." Okay, weren't they also God's Misfits? That's what they called themselves. But anyway, in the video, she's acting totally normal, and you also see that she has her 2 grandkids, who are Veronica's kids, with her. New information about Tad's arrest has also come to light. When he was arrested, he had a rifle, ammunition, body armor, and a go bag at his home. And apparently, Paul Grice was actually at Tad's home when Tad was arrested. The agents who arrested Tad noticed that Paul had a bandaged pinky finger when all of this went down as well. When they asked him about it, he said that he cut his finger while he was working on his truck. However, a separate witness has now come forward and said that they witnessed Paul with that same bandage on his pinky on March 30th and March 31st. Paul told this person that he cut his finger while he was installing a fence. And that isn't the only suspicious information that has been released about Paul. A separate witness came forward and said that Paul came to his house on April 17th and started asking him a lot of weird questions. Paul was apparently asking about how police process DNA evidence, how long does DNA last in the dirt. He even asked a guy how he could get his family into Mexico without being noticed. I mean, definitely not innocent questions and just conversation pieces at that point. And at that point, Cora and Cole had already been arrested. Paul said that he was worried that his DNA would be found in the hole where Veronica and Jillian were found because he had been over at the Toombley family home, as if Cora and Cole would just pick up Paul's DNA at their own home and then somehow leave it in a dirt hole. I don't know, but this is what he was saying. So currently it seems like none of Jillian and Veronica's personal belongings, like their clothing, their cell phones, or their jewelry, have been found. However, search warrants were released for various vehicles and other items belonging to Tiffany, Tad, Cora, Cole, and Paul. These search warrants all indicate that police are still searching for Jillian and Veronica's personal belongings. They're also searching for any other items that could indicate that a crime was committed. The warrants also indicated that the police were looking for kitty litter. Apparently, kitty litter had been found at the crime scene and it was used to soak up fluid that was on the road. One search warrant is for Cora and Cole's pickup truck, and it's that same truck that their daughter was forced to clean after her parents came back from their, quote, mission on March 30th. Apparently, one of the daughter's friends also helped clean the truck, and the friend told the investigators that she did see some reddish stains in the truck, and she thought that they were blood stains. Then on April 17th, after the search warrant was issued, investigators took a couple items from the truck. They took a white iPhone, a black iPhone, and white cloth gloves. There was also a search warrant for their white trailer, and remember that witnesses say that they saw a white trailer on March 30th near the area where Jillian and Veronica went missing. And this search warrant came about after Clint Toombley, Cole's relative, called the OSBI on April 16th. He said that a trailer had appeared on his property overnight, and he wasn't sure how it got there. The trailer was taken, and the search warrant indicated that they were looking for Jillian and Veronica's personal items in the trailer, along with possible bloodstains and DNA evidence. And then finally, another search warrant was issued for Tiffany's white Nissan Altima, along with Cora and Cole's blue flatbed truck. Once again, the warrants indicated that they were looking for Jillian and Veronica's personal items. But, as far as we know, nothing has been found yet. So my question is, it seems like they're finally piecing together this crime, this horrific crime that goes so deep that has all of these players involved. They found all of their clothing, in my opinion, but they haven't found Jillian or Veronica's belongings. Where could it be? Incinerated? Hidden somewhere really, really good that they haven't been able to find? Have you heard anything about where that could be? Because I would imagine once that stuff is found, if it is recovered, it's going to have a slew of evidence on it. Not only DNA, forensic, all of that, but think about the phones. Think about the digital evidence. What was the ruse to get them out there or to stop them? What has the history been like on that phone for text exchanges or phone calls? I mean, it's going to be really interesting once that is recovered, if it still exists, which it's got to exist somewhere, right? But maybe it is destroyed and maybe there's nothing they can do with it at this point. But I will keep you guys updated as this case continues to unfold. It is one of the wilder ones that we've talked about, and it kind of gives me, in a non-direct way, why did I say non-direct? In an indirect way, it kind of gives me Adelson vibes in a weird way. And really the only parallel is that it's these families who were involved in this, but it kind of gives me that. It's a big amount of family members too that are involved in something, and we don't see that too often. And so I think that's why people are so fascinated with this case as well. But I'm rambling now, so I will keep you updated to make sure that you stay in the know of these updates, all case updates, all new cases, everything. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss them. All right, guys, thanks again for tuning in, and until the next one, stay safe.